"Don't cry, ma'am. You can borrow our dad," said the little twins to the lonely woman sitting alone. She had not planned to stop at the park that evening, yet her feet carried her there as if they remembered the path better than her mind did. Guiding her through the falling snow, too, the old wooden bench that faced the glowing Christmas tree. The lights shimmered softly, blurring through the moisture in her eyes, and she told herself she was only tired, that the ache in her chest was nothing new, just another weight she had learned to live with. She sat down slowly, her coat pulled tight around her body, hands folded together as if holding herself in place. Around her, life continued in quiet fragments, distant laughter, the crunch of footsteps on snow, the low hum of the city breathing somewhere beyond the trees, but none of it reached her. Her thoughts drifted where they always did on evenings like this, to memories she tried not to visit, to conversations that ended too soon, to a voice she no longer heard calling her name. She stared at the ground, watching snowflakes disappear as they touched the earth, wondering when she had started feeling so much like them, arriving softly, leaving no trace. A tear slipped down before she could stop it, then another, and she quickly brushed them away, embarrassed even though no one seemed to be looking. She told herself to stand up, to go home, to stop sitting here like someone waiting for something that would never come. That was when a small shadow crossed her vision. She looked up, startled, and found herself facing two little girls standing directly in front of her, close enough that she could see the fine snow clinging to their eyelashes. They were nearly identical, dressed in cream-colored coats and green dresses. Red Santa hats tilted slightly on their heads, their cheeks glowing with cold and life. For a moment, the woman simply stared, unsure if this was real or if loneliness had begun to play tricks on her mind. The girls stared back without fear, their expressions open and curious, as if adults crying on park benches were not strange at all. One of them smiled, a small, sincere smile that carried no judgment, only recognition, and took a half step forward. Before the woman could speak, before she could apologize or pretend she was fine, the child reached out her hand, palm up, steady and certain. "Don't cry, ma'am," the girl said gently, her voice clear in the cold air. "You can borrow our dad." The words settled between them, simple and impossible at the same time. The woman felt her breath catch, her heart stumbling as if it had tripped over something fragile. She glanced at the other twin, who nodded seriously, as if this offer had already been discussed and agreed upon. Confused, the woman looked past them and noticed a man standing a few steps away, watching the scene unfold. He didn't rush forward or pull the girls back. He simply stood there, hands in his coat pockets, his expression calm, observant, and quietly protective. There was no anger on his face, no embarrassment, only patience, as though he trusted his daughters to lead this moment wherever it needed to go. The woman felt a laugh rise unexpectedly through her tears, shaky and broken, followed by a fresh wave of emotion she could no longer contain. She covered her mouth, shaking her head slightly, not in refusal, but disbelief, overwhelmed by the purity of what had just been offered to her. The twins didn't move away when she cried harder. They stayed rooted in front of her, their small boots firm in the snow, as if leaving was not an option. Slowly, almost carefully, she placed her gloved hand into the tiny one extended toward her. The warmth surprised her, seeping through the fabric, reaching somewhere deeper than skin. It was such a simple thing, yet it felt like an anchor, holding her in place when everything inside her threatened to drift apart. The man took a few steps closer then, stopping at a respectful distance, his voice low and gentle as he apologized for interrupting, though there was no real apology in his eyes, only concern. She shook her head quickly, managing a fragile smile, and told him it was all right, that they hadn't done anything wrong. The truth was, she didn't even know how to explain what they had done right. The twins looked pleased, as if her response confirmed something important. And without asking, they climbed onto the bench beside her, one settling on each side, their movements natural and unafraid. The woman stiffened for a brief second, surprised by the closeness, then slowly relaxed, feeling their presence like a quiet reassurance. She stared ahead at the glowing tree, the lights reflecting off the snow, and realized she was no longer crying. The ache was still there, heavy and familiar, but it no longer felt as sharp. She breathed in deeply, the cold air filling her lungs, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she didn't feel entirely alone in the world. She sat there between the twins, aware of their small shoulders pressed lightly against her arms, the simple weight of them grounding her in a way she hadn't realized she was craving. And for a few quiet moments, none of them spoke. The snow continued to fall, soft and patient, settling on coats and hats as if the night itself had decided to slow down for them. The man approached a little closer and sat at the far end of the bench, leaving space while still being present. His posture relaxed but attentive, the kind that said he was listening even when nothing was being said. The woman let out a long breath she hadn't noticed she was holding, and without planning to, she began to talk. Her words came slowly at first, carefully chosen, as though she feared that saying too much might break the fragile calm that had formed around them. She spoke about loneliness without naming its cause, about how days could pass filled with people and noise yet still feel unbearably empty, about how evenings were the hardest because they left room for thoughts she couldn't outrun. The twins listened with surprising seriousness, their eyes fixed on her face, absorbing every word as if it mattered deeply to them. And when her voice faltered, one of them gently squeezed her arm, not saying anything, just reminding her she was still there, encouraged by the silence that did not judge her. The woman continued, admitting that she often felt invisible, like someone watching life through glass, present but untouched. The man didn't interrupt, didn't offer solutions or explanations, and that quiet acceptance made it easier for her to keep going. When she finally paused, unsure if she had said too much, one of the twins looked up at her with complete certainty and said that sometimes people just needed someone to sit with them so the sadness wouldn't get bored and leave. The woman laughed, a real laugh this time, surprised by its sound, and even the man smiled at that, shaking his head slightly as if acknowledging a truth adults often forgot. The moment felt strangely complete, as if nothing else was required. The twins began talking about small things, then about their favorite stories, about snow that looked like sugar, about how their dad made the best pancakes, even if he pretended not to care, about shapes, and the woman found herself responding, answering questions she hadn't been asked in years, feeling herself re-enter the world through ordinary conversation. She noticed how carefully the man watched his daughters, how his eyes softened when they spoke, and she realized that when they had offered to let her borrow their dad, they hadn't meant ownership or replacement. They had meant presence, the simple act of not being alone with your thoughts. As the cold deepened, the man suggested they should start heading home, and the twins protested, half-heartedly before turning to the woman with serious expressions, as if negotiating something important. They asked if she would be okay now, and she nodded, surprised to find that the answer was honest. She stood up slowly, feeling steadier than when she had arrived, and thanked them all, her voice firm despite the emotion behind it. The man offered to walk her to the park gate, and after a brief hesitation, she accepted. Not because she felt weak, but because she didn't want the connection to end too abruptly. They walked together, the twins skipping slightly ahead, their laughter drifting back like a promise that warmth could exist even on the coldest nights. At the gate, the woman stopped and turned to face them, memorizing the scene without realizing it's a glow of the lamps, the snow on their shoulders, the calm steadiness of the man standing behind his daughters. One of the twins reminded her, very seriously, that she could borrow their dad again if she ever needed to, and the woman knelt slightly to their level, thanking them in a way that felt too big for words. She watched as they walked away, their figures slowly blending into the night, and only then did she realize that something inside her had shifted. The pain she carried hadn't vanished, but it had changed shape. It felt less like a closed door and more like a room with windows, letting in light she hadn't known was possible. As she turned and headed toward home, her steps lighter. She understood that this night would stay with her not because it erased her sorrow, but because it reminded her that connection could appear when least expected, offered freely by those who had nothing to gain except the quiet joy of kindness.